Now so far, in order for us to run our calculator, we've been in Jupyter Notebooks and we've been running the respective cell that contains the code. So for example, here I am in Jupyter Notebook, and when I run this code cell, a separate GUI app window appears and we're able to interact with our program. Now when it comes to using this calculator, it would be a little bit clunky if we always had to open up a Jupyter Notebook and then run the app accordingly. Now a more efficient way to run this program would be to store our code in a .py file. So if I copy this code base and paste it across into a new file within Visual Studio Code, and we've called this file my_calculator.py, what I'm able to do is then execute this program directly from my Anaconda prompt. So for example, if I open up Anaconda prompt and locate the folder in which we've stored our my_calculator.py file, when I type python my_calculator.py, the calculator application runs and we're able to interact with it in the same way that we did when we executed it from a Jupyter Notebook. Now, although running this Python script using a command prompt is very straightforward, there are sometimes situations in which you will just prefer to hide the code written in the script. Some people get a bit confused when they start seeing a lot of code, and the best way that we can hide this is by putting the code inside what is known as an executable file, or in this case a .exe file, which is what we're going to be focusing on. So for example, you might want to send this application to someone who doesn't know any code at all and they have no interest in even seeing the code. This is a perfect case for when you may want to convert this into an executable file. Or secondly, you might want to schedule the calculator to open up on your machine at a specific time in the day. In other words, you might want to schedule a job that runs a .exe file at a specific time on your computer. Now, whatever your use case may be, this video will show you how to create an executable file step by step. And the way we're going to do this is by utilizing what is known as AutoPy to exe. Now, AutoPy to exe has a very user-friendly interface that will help us convert the .py file into an exe file. So let's begin. The first thing you will need to do is make sure that you have AutoPy to exe installed on your machine. So you can open up a command prompt and simply type pip install AutoPy to exe, just like I have on my screen here. Now you can see here that when I try to execute this line of code and install AutoPy to exe, the requirement is already satisfied because I've already installed it on my machine. Now something to remember here is that wherever you're storing your script that you want to convert into an exe file, you need to ensure that the working environment in which we're installing the AutoPy to exe contains all the necessary libraries that the script needs in order to run. Now in our case we have a very simple program, it utilizes tkinter, so we know that we do, but this is just something to keep in mind if your applications get more complex and you need to install more modules into the application. Now once AutoPy to exe has been installed on your machine, you can simply type in your command prompt auto-py-2-exe. Now after you run this command, you will be presented with a GUI application that will open up, and it should look something like this. A very simple user interface which will help us convert the .py file into a .exe file. Now the first thing that we need to do is populate the script location. Now this is as simple as selecting Browse and locating the file path where your script is stored. So in my case, I can click on Browse and I can locate the tkinter folder, calculator, which is where my_calculator.py file is saved down. Now the next thing for us to select is whether we want one directory or one file. Now if you select one directory, this will create a directory with all the dependencies your script needs to run, and that includes the executable file itself. So there may be many files in this directory that you won't even know exist. So if you're not interested in all the dependencies that make up this application, you can simply select one file, which will literally be the executable file that when selected will open up your program. So let's select one file for this example. Feel free to perform the same task and select one directory to see how this differs from one file. The next step is to choose either console-based or window-based. Now, if you choose the console-based option, what will happen is the console will open up after it's run the executable file. So if your script generates some form of console-based output, it's recommended that you would use console-based so you can see what this output is. But if you don't want to show the console outputs when running the executable, just simply select window-based. Because we're not interested in the console output for our calculator application, I'm going to change this selection to window-based. Now there are numerous other options that we can select. For example, we can provide a .ico file, which is an icon file, which would change the icon related to your executable. So if you wanted to give your application a little logo, you can change the .ico file, which would then make your application a little more personal. The next option allows us to select additional files. So if your script needs some files to run, you can add the files or folders in this section here. Our program doesn't need any files to run, so for this example, I won't be selecting any additional files. You then have some advanced options which you can select, which I'm not going to go through now. But what I will show you is within the settings section, you're able to choose the specific output directory where you want this executable to be stored. This is defaulted to the users/tom/output folder. I'm happy with this, so we'll leave the output directory as this location. Now with this all set, all we need to do now is convert the py file to .exe, and we simply need to click the blue button at the bottom. Now the current command that you're seeing here, where it says PyInstaller, is the code that PyInstaller will use, which is the main library that sits behind this AutoPy to exe GUI. So if you wanted to do it manually, you would have been able to do so by typing something very similar as the current command. Using a GUI is always much more user-friendly, so I've opted to do it the easy way. And when this process finishes running, I'm able to open the output folder, and if I double click on my _calculator, just like I would if I was opening any application, you can see that our program launches. Better still, if I was to search for the application within my Windows search bar, so if I put my _calculator, I'm able to locate the file here, and if I hit return, the calculator opens up. Just like any application would, for example, if I wanted to open up the Notepad application. Once again, we could have provided this executable with a .ico file, which would have changed the logo associated with this application. Now, one of the biggest benefits with this approach is that you're able to share this executable file with whoever you want. They don't need Python installed on their machine because it's already been compiled into something that a Windows machine or a Mac machine, if you're using a Mac, would understand. So hopefully you can see how beneficial this could be when developing programs for your end user community. In the next video, we're going to see how we can get our computer to run our application at a certain time, which is known as scheduling a job, so that the application opens up automatically and runs without us having to do a thing. A very useful thing to know if you're trying to automate processes and run things at specific times, and this could be even when you're asleep. So I'll see you in the next video.